Rebecca with Village Farm Tiny Home Community. Better late than never. We're here with some of our neighbors about to pick fresh okra from Greengate Farms. Join us this morning. After we pick okra fresh from the fields, we're going to learn how to pickle it. Miss Erin from Greengate Farms will be leading the workshop. Super exciting. Today we have a few residents with us who are going to be picking the okra, and then the second portion of it will take place inside of the farmhouse, where Erin will teach how to add seasonings, the vinegar, the okra, all the essential ingredients into the can so that it can be pickled and you have a nice, delicious snack ready for you.
And Agora's here.
Yes, Agora's our okra assistant. Pretty much the only thing that grows on the farm in August in Texas, Central Texas, is okra. So this is a very appropriate thing to be harvesting this time of year. Is Skip out here? Alright, hi Skip! This will be the greenhouse. It's still getting all of the items set up inside. He's our okra picking assistant. Alright, let's do this. Well, there's not really much else going on the farm right now. It's just the okra. Skip, do you want to lead this?
Yeah, sure. Hi. So how many of you have picked okra?
I've never taken okra in my life.
Really? You know what it looks like?
I saw a picture of it and it was really beautiful, and I was like, wow.
Well, it's hard to miss here. As Rebecca said, this is not the only thing that loves scissors and does really well all through the summer.
Are these bad boys right here?
Now, believe it or not, these were here since April.
Huh.
And I've had okra get 10 feet tall. And you have to actually get a ladder to harvest it.
Wow.
So sometimes what we do, because it goes on for so long, and during the end of the summer when the season's over, we'll actually come and cut it down, like right down here, and it'll re-sprout like a tree, just has a trunk, and then it puts on new leaves or new flowers.
The flowers are pretty. Do
Are
they
they- so
have a
this-
scent?
Not too much, no, but it's the hibiscus family. It doesn't look like a hibiscus.
Yeah, it does.
And these flowers, every day they open up and then they close, when they heat. And the big thing to know about okra is you've got to stress it. You've got to harvest every day almost, because otherwise the pods will get huge and then they just stop producing. And all the vegetables out here, basically you're picking them a lot to stress them. And they feel like, oh, we've got to produce more because the season's over, or there's these really mean bugs with scissors taking all of our fruit. So we got to produce more. But with okra, one of the downsides is that it gets so big so fast, and it gets tough after about 3 or 4 inches. But what you're seeing here are 2 different varieties, and this variety is an heirloom, and it's called red velvet or crimson velvet. And then the green is the standard. 90% of the okra you'll see is called spineless Clemson. It was developed by the University of Clemson to have, it still has spines. And the spines are really what makes you itch on all these. Tomatoes have them too, cucumbers have them.
So we're going to get itchy?
You rub up against it and you start itching. Some people it bothers much worse than others, but what happens is after about 5 minutes you'll start itching like crazy, and you can't really wash it off.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
So-
guys, you're in for a treat.
You're gonna avoid that by not brushing up against the leaves. Who needs scissors? Okay. And the thing to
Maybe it'll
know
be a stander
is to
by.
get the right size too. So this size, this variety you can get bigger without starting to get too hard. The Clemson gets really that thick and hard really quickly, and it gets stringy. Like see, this is really big, and when you break it, see it's not stringy now. I went got a bigger one like this. See, just that little bit is starting to get those strands in here, and they won't pull. So that makes it really hard to eat. And I like to eat it raw too.
Yeah, I had it raw the other day. It was so good.
The nutritious value is incredible if you read all about it. Of okra. One of the things to know is look at the size of these roots here, these trunks. And so one of the hardest parts is how it does not decompose easily. And so a lot of times we'll mow them down and leave them in there all throughout the winter. They'll slowly decompose because otherwise you're pulling out a lot of labor to get them out and knock off all the dirt and so on. There's a third variety we used to grow called hill country. It's a native to the hill country, and it's really short and stubby, and it's pretty, but it's so, people think it's too hard, so they don't like it because they think, oh, it's gotten too long, been out there too long. So the first, what you'll do is just scissors really work well. I mean, when you're, a lot of times we can just break it off like that too. That takes a little bit of action. And the scissors, I'm just going to try and avoid cutting any of the leaves, and just clip them like that and put them in your basket. And that's ideal size for this. Any bigger I would not take. And then about this size is about the smallest I would go.
Okay.
And this was actually just harvested 2 days ago. So in 2 days, this is how it's gone from these little tiny ones, these little buds, to in this heat water. Good enough heat and water, it does amazing.
And no differentiation on the size that's acceptable between the Clemsons and the
Yeah, so smaller over at the Clemson.
small?
You go around that. We have old cucumbers in here. They've been here for 6 months. Over here. In fact, why don't we just start over here?
Are these ones easier to harvest?
No, they're all about the same. I'll go for the smaller ones, like this size and smaller.
Okay.
This is too big. And what we do, we just toss those on the ground, or give them a big.
Pick them. Just get them.
Yeah, so
grow again.
Start filling up your bag,
Okay.
and But what you have to do though is get rid of these. If we don't harvest those, they're just going to get bigger, and the plants will slow down.
Okay.
Just like
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
Got this.
Get more boots.
What am I walking in the wrong
This is
thing?
a row that's going to be planted soon.
Nothing in it yet, but I
Yeah.
just killed it.
There's just a lot of old weeds in here.
And I was like, I'm gonna have to get.
Feel free to comment with any questions if you're watching the live stream.
Okay.
So the other thing, you can see how much this has grown. All the stalks just keep going and going, reaching higher and higher, and they get less and less. Like this one has no leaves on it anymore, but it's still producing. So eventually, this is on its way out. Another month, that's too big, yeah. In another month, this will really slow down, and it'll be so tall that it'll be really hard to harvest.
So is this like too big? This one's
That's probably that's good. Yeah. The other thing is the color too. You can tell by looking at it how long it's been on there, and as they've been on there longer, it's not just the size, but it's also the color, and it gets harder and harder the longer it's on there. Some of these get. The other thing you'll notice, ants love these.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
So the ants will come up and they'll get their sugars out of here, and then it starts to deform like that, and so we just take that off and
Let that one go.
don't use that. But
Can't you use a pesticide to kill the ants? I'm just kidding.
yeah, we spray it to death, everything. No, that
Good
wouldn't
one,
work.
John.
And I just back 3/4 of the way. It was earlier this year. It was just filled with ants. Every
Man.
single one had a hole in it.
Diatomaceous
That
earth
one
works, right? Just
Yeah.
to put that down. That's a natural one.
Looks good.
But then they stopped, and everything was fine. Are you all looking for work?
Yeah.
The biggest thing now is to start weeding. We have cucumbers.
What do you say, Becca?
Okra's delicious and totally worth the labor, but the ants were getting me, so I'm taking a time out. Although these ones look like they'd be easy to grab. I just didn't grab any scissors. Got it. stems are actually coming off pretty easily. Ugh.
Ooh, that's a big walk. Sort of walk.
It's like slimy.
Yeah, what, eating it? Or
No,
picking
just the way my hand feels
it?
right
Like it's
now.
sticky.
Yeah.
That's really sticky, yeah.
It's a flower.
So that's a paper walk. He's gone. My favorite is the red, so you might want to get some.
I'm gonna go get some
I
red.
found a cucumber.
That cucumber has been in there. I've never had cucumbers go so long. They've been in there since the spring.
Want me to pick it?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it's
Oh,
still
no, that's
it's
gone.
done. The other side of it's still good.
Yeah, these are just been amazing. But it's about done. Yeah, let's get the red.
Oh, this one looks ready.
That's too big, Rebecca.
Oh, what do I do?
That'd be
Leave
too
it?
hard. No, you don't want to leave it.
Okay.
That's for the ants. Is anyone starting to itch? Yeah. Oh, good.
No, I'm not itching.
Earn your stripes.
Yeah.
You guys need to get the full experience. We want lots of itching. Really embrace the okra plant.
Be one with the plant. Is this one too big or?
Yeah. So the spineless Clemson was developed at Clemson to make those ridges in it. See how it has much deeper ridges?
Yeah.
And it's better, faster produced, and it's more hardiness. The other thing I didn't say about okra, it's indestructible. I've never had a crop failure with okra in all these years because the pests don't like it. It has really good disease resistance, and because it gets so big and tough, most animals don't bother it except deer. The only crop I ever lost was in the spring one time when they were really young. The deer came in and just wiped them all out. But it was really enough that I was able to start over again. But as you can see, I mean, these are just starting to get a little bit of chlorosis here with maybe too much water. And this means that these plants are stressed from so much heat. And they're just on the way out. They're kind of done with their cycle.
Did you say fluorosis?
Chlorosis?
Oh, chlorosis.
Yeah.
From chlorine?
No, so when there's so much water uptake, it loses its the greenness there.
Too much water.
Too much water. When you see yellow, it's either a sign of not enough nitrogen, or it's too much nitrogen.
The plants are communicating with you.
They're having trouble uptaking some of the calcium and some of the other minerals, just because everything just gets messed up when it gets this hot, and they've had so much water for so long. The soil starts to get depleted.
That's where the compost comes in.
Yeah, but I wouldn't do that now. I did do fishing. Pick some fish, and then we put it in this backpack sprayer and mix it up, and that puts nitrogen right into the. A lot of farmers would actually take the fish and put it into the drip tape.
Oh, wow.
So you can pump it right into the drip tape, and each little drop has a little bit of fish emulsion. It's really nasty stuff, but it has really high nitrogen.
That's why aquaponics works well, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. So you can add it through the drip john. The only problem with putting it through the drip tape is that it clogs it up eventually. So.
Nice shirt, Scotty.
That's what we were just saying.
Pretty good.
Nah.
It was
I'm good.
free movement. It became really relevant in the past couple months.
So do you all have enough now?
Yeah, should we go process?
I was gonna say, what is enough?
Well,
Is your bag full of okra?
enough to do a
Your
couple of
abundance?
what you can, or you already got some of it. Rebecca, do they have some?
This is what I picked.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
is this what they need for their canning, or they have some more?
They've got the kids.
The kids too.
Yeah.
Okay. This is just the
I didn't even know okra grew like this, so this was a surprise to me.
yeah.
It's a good confidence boosting crop
Isn't it?
to start with. You
Yeah.
could get some victories in.
It really is. It never goes wrong. The downside is just high maintenance. Yeah, that's perfect. High maintenance. You got to harvest it almost every day.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, no, but people get sick of okra after a while.
That's why I gotta pickle
You
it.
gotta pickle it.
And you just eat them after they're pickled?
So yeah.
Yeah, they're like little crunchy snacks. I put them in the fridge. Aaron let me taste test some, and they're so good. I ate them within 10 minutes.
Yeah, Kirk was like eating them whole.
Yes. All right, should we move on to the processing, or should we go into Aaron? I can get their kits for the participants.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This while you're filming that's the workhorse here. It's called a BCS, and it's made in Italy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
They know what they're doing there.
and so this is the tiller,
Looks like a beast of a tiller.
isn't it?
Wow.
But it also has a flail mower on it. So I was mowing here earlier, and what's so amazing. So for the tilling, it's from behind, right? But the flail mower, it's in front, and so you just spin this around.
It's pretty clever.
Isn't that clever? So you can do it from 2 different kinds of implements.
Wow.
And the Italians, they are such good machinists. Everything they make is so well, like, layouts and stuff. So now this is the mower, I put the mower on. And so right here is a quick hitch. And you can put different implements on there.
Cool.
Put a mower, a sickle bar, snow blower,
It's a little tractor.
little tractor, yeah. And they actually have sulkies that you can attach behind it so you can sit on it as well.
Ha! Wow.
But it's really heavy. This is the biggest they make. Okay, time to.
Wrapping it up? Is that a wrap?
I think I heard enough for this one, man.
We'll get y'all some kits that have extra okra too. That you can eat when you harvest it, and then also there's the big little bag. There's some cans that are already done in here.
Any of you feel free to come out here any morning and harvest with me.
I probably.
How do you volunteer? What are the volunteer opportunities?
Well, we're going to start that schedule going most likely Wednesdays and Saturdays. Morning.
You get up here at 9?
So these are the volunteers here today. Well, we can get in earlier. We start at 7:30, 8 usually.
For the beat they eat?
I'm getting excited.
Yeah.
Going back to my roots, like, I'm like, alright.
Yeah.
Ready to get my work boots done. I think I need a tack box. I need some.
But this is our busiest time of year right now. There is so much stuff that has to get in order to get a second summer crop before the freeze. And so, like you saw, we got another round of zucchini, cucumbers. A lot of these things that just do not like cold weather. And as the sun gets lower and days are shorter, they're not going to produce. You don't get them in August, which is the hardest time to do it. It's a real challenge to have enough food for CSA by the first week of September. That's a pretty busy time. That's on the farm. Something that you can take. I got some really big stuff.
I'll go get some kits for y'all.
This is too big.
And then I think for the pickling portion, if you want to tune in live on the Facebook video,
Okay.
so I'll go get those little kits. They have all the spices and everything. You just need vinegar.
No, I don't have.
No.
I do. I have plenty. Okay. Perfect.
Hey, neighbors! All right, I'll be right back.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Get out here.
All right, we're masking up, going inside. And for anyone who hasn't seen the farmhouse yet, hello. It was great. A little itchy, but other than that, life is good. I'm gonna grab. Did you perhaps prepare little kits? Yay! Okay. Perfect. Well, I'll go deliver these, and then maybe y'all can start on the tutorial.
Oh no, aren't they here? Are they?
Are you comfortable with them coming inside? I didn't know what the COVID said. Okay. Yep. And then, hey, y'all, as long as you have vinegar stuff, you should
How was your harvest?
Itchy.
Itchy. Exactly.
Yes. Okay, so there's even more okra in here.
Yeah. So we'll wait till you get there to get started. But the main thing is we're gonna boil the jars. So you want to get a saucepan out that can cover the jars in water. And so the minute you get in there, start boiling them. Perfect. That's it. And you can cover my house with the vinegar. Okay. Yeah. Hi.
Hey, while we wait for them, we can do a little tour of the farmhouse now that everything's set up.
Okay. All right.
Do you want to lead?
Sure.
So we just had an interior decorator help us out. The design was farmhouse chic. Oh yeah, get the goods.
I don't know. So I need some.
We're live. You can look at the camera when explaining stuff. We have a few people tuned in.
Oh, you do? Oh, hi, everybody. Hi, neighbors. So we're in the Bergstrom Farmhouse kitchen, and this has been completely redone, and we're really excited because we're going to have our first cooking class in here, and the whole purpose is that eventually people will be here around this island and will learn how to make all kinds of things. One of the first things we want to do, though, this fall is begin to show people how to take things, harvest things from the farm, whether it's flowers or vegetables. And if you get a share of vegetables every week, sometimes you'll get things that you don't know what to do with. So we want to have a cooking class where we show you, oh, this is what I can do with mustard greens, or this is what I can do with butternut squash. So anyway, I love this kitchen because of the high ceilings. And off to the side here is a pantry. But let's go into this room over here. This room, Rebecca had a great idea. We're going to call this the music room because we have an antique piano that will go here. And hopefully there'll be lots of jamming going on. I think we probably have a lot of talents around the neighborhood, so we wanted to have some people playing guitar and singing. So this is just a lovely room that faces west. And just so you know, the farmhouse itself, when it was first built in 1902, the front door would have been here. Because back in 1902, what was out here was an enormous pond. And the neighbors would come fishing and the people would go swimming. So this was the entrance. Because of the development, that's actually shifted. So that front door we really don't use much at all. We'll probably use it for events. And since we're in this hallway, again, this is a lovely space, and the intention here is we're going to be putting in historic information about the people who built this. And so, again, that was the Bergstrom family. So eventually we want to have a history committee for the farm and gather information about growing food in Central Texas and display it in the barn, but then also celebrate the people that built the farmhouse. So let's go in here. Rebecca had another great idea. This room is going to be the library. And what we'd like to do is have a lending library in here. And it can be a place where people read and relax. And one thing I'm really excited about is
Okay, we're back. And we're back.
Okay, so I was about to say that the interior designer got in touch with a farmer down the street who is Swedish, and she runs an antique business in addition to farming. She runs at Munkibo Farm. Her name is Jermaine Swenson. Anyway, she has a collection of beautiful period pieces that really make this farmhouse feel like it might have in the day. So this is an East Lake table.
Aaron, somebody was asking on the feed about the okra. Can you eat okra raw? Rachel
Yes.
Ann asks.
It's the best way to eat it. And when we teach the class, I'm going to show you how.
You're gonna demonstrate.
Demonstrate. Yeah. So we'll just wrap this up. There's a brand new bathroom in here. And then this room is going to be the art room. And I'm really, really excited about this because it has beautiful northern light. And the intention will be that we'll be teaching photography classes and doing different kinds of artwork projects in this space. One thing I do every week is we take photographs of what's coming from the field, whether it's vegetables or flowers. And so we'll be doing our portrait and photography work in here. And I'm hoping, I'm just going to plug a class, I want to have a floral tattoo class in the fall so people can wear flowers. We'll talk about that later.
Cool.
So, are we ready to get started on the class?
Last we have time for Vandalina, Stephanie, and Scotty to get back home. Since it's just, what, a 2-minute walk to their tiny home? So they should be tuning in now. I think this would be a good time to start in on really the instructions on how to pickle okra.
Okay.
This is a burning question. How do we do it? How do we pull it off?
Well, you know, the most important thing is which apron do I want to wear today? I have a collection of aprons. Let's see, what mood am I in? Oh, this is my frilly one. I'm going to wear my frilly one. And I'm going to take this off because you're 6 feet
Yeah, we're
away.
6 feet away.
And it'll be easier for you to hear me. So, hey neighbors, how many people do we have?
5.
5, okay. So, you should have received a kit that contains 2 pounds of okra and 2 jars that have spices in them. Before we get started on anything, what I want you to do is find a plate for each jar, because what we're going to do when you're canning, it's always good to put the thing into a warm container. So I'm going to empty each can onto a plate because we're going to reuse these spices. And just so everyone knows, I've already washed my hands. So I did that earlier. So the goal is you're going to have your empty jars and put them into a pot to sterilize them. Now, everybody received brand new jars, so they're already clean, but this is, again, it's just a good idea to get into the habit of sterilizing your things before you use them. So, here's a tip. When people are typically doing canning, you know, if you're really going to do this on a regular basis, you invest in an enamel pot, and this is a really thin piece of metal, so it heats up really quickly. And if you look in here, I set it up so you can see that there's a jar lifter, which is this metal thing, and the jars fit in each of these segments. But I also put in a towel, because if you don't have a jar lifter, like if you don't have this metal contraption, the trick is you just want to make sure that the jars are not banging on the bottom of the container, because even though they're really thick, it compromises the jar. So if you don't have a lot of equipment, all you need, really for canning, you just need a lot of dish towels. So this little saucepan is very small, and some of you may have very small saucepans in your tiny houses. I'm going to put a dish towel on the bottom, and again, I'm just going to try and fit these in. And again, this is not ideal. Ideally, I have a bigger saucepan, and the jars would be covered in water. How many of you have a saucepan that's big enough? Anybody responding?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Our saucepan's tiny.
All right, okay. So just so you know, if you're going to be canning on a regular basis, and I really recommend that you do, because it's easy. I think it's really important at this point to say that I think a lot of people are afraid of canning because they think they're going to poison somebody or they'll get botulism. And the fact is, you really can't do that when it comes to pickled okra. I mean, you have to, I don't know how you would do it, because this is a low acid food. It's really, really simple to can. It's one of the simplest things to in fact, the end result is going to be this. You're going to have a jar, and these things are, you only need this during the canning process, the rain during the canning process. You're going to have a seal with this top that's going to preserve this pickled okra for at least a year. This is not going to be coming off. So we're going to learn today on how you make the perfect seal. So that's really the only thing you need to be concerned about when you're doing this. So it's really simple. So anyway,
Rachel Ann says that her pot at home is small.
okay.
Yeah,
So
she's another tiny home dweller. She got the kit. So
okay. So
yeah, I think a lot of us have smaller pans because we are
right.
dealing with less storage than most folks.
Well, for this class, it's really important that you find a pot where the this jar is immersed in water. It has to be completely covered in water. So now's the time. If you don't have one, you really have to dig out in your pantry to cover the jars in water. Because when we're doing the seal, it'll have to be boiling in water. And it can't be laying down because the contents will spill out. Or it might not seal properly. So that is an important component. So while these jars are sterilizing, I'm going to talk a little bit about okra. Because a lot of you are asking questions about.
I'm going to move this even though it's perfectly beautiful so we can get a better shot.
Okay, so if you want to open up your bags of okra, and okra is really a superfood. It is an incredible vegetable. It has magnesium and vitamin A, E, and it's high fiber, low calorie. It's really, really good for you. But one of the things that people get put off by okra is it's slippery. And typically when people have okra, they're having it in gumbo, where it's especially slippery. But in order to enjoy okra, all you have to do is eat it fresh. And it crunches. It's really satisfying in the summer. I think it's just fabulous. It really is. And so today, and you can eat the green ones, the red ones. They're all delicious fresh. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take our okra and we're going to wash it lightly. And again, this just came fresh from the field. So it hasn't been sitting around long at all. Okay? All right. So now let's examine our okra. So it's likely that you found all kinds of pieces in your mix. So when we're harvesting, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find pieces, for this purpose anyway, that will fit in the jar, right? Without trimming it. Because when you start trimming, like if you're cutting this up, you don't really want to cut the tops off just to make room. But when you trim this, what happens is the vinegars and such get inside, and then it makes it more slippery. And again, that's fine, but some people aren't going to like that texture. So just so you know, what would be ideal for today's class is finding these pieces that will fit in the jar well. And again, cutting off the heads, cutting off these tips, is one of the quickest ways you can see if it's going to fit. So when you're choosing your okra, this takes a little practice because these look fine, but sometimes when you squeeze them, this one actually feels what we call woody. It feels kind of stiff. And the only way to tell if it's really bad is to eat it. And actually, this one's not bad. But it's very common, especially this time of year, is that your okra has been beat up in the sun for months. We planted it in spring. We're now hitting 106 degrees over and over. It's not unusual for bits of okra to start getting kind of hard just because they're tired. So What you want though is you're going to squeeze your okra and you want to get some that kind of give back, right? You don't want it to be really, really hard. If it's really hard, don't fool with it. Like this one, yeah, it's too big for this process and it's a little hard. So as we're sorting, you may also come across S. So this is the flower that started the okra. Now this little booger they start going crooked. You could put them in your jar, but they're really just going to end up taking up space. So they're not ideal for this. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that when I was doing all this canning, I tried to include both green and red. Now the red, I think is kind of cool, but it will change the color of the canning liquid. And so what you'll have, and it might be more obvious on one of these, let's see, you'll have this reddish tint to the juices, and all that is the red okra kind of beginning to shed some of its color. The cool thing about red okra is that when you cook it, it's going to turn green. But, so in this jar, if you don't like this reddish color, then just use the green. I kind of like mixing them up. So what you should be doing now is kind of looking at your jars and thinking, okay, well now this won't fit unless it's crooked, put in crooked. It will fit if we cut the tip. But again, you're going to be getting more of the, I don't want to say mucus, it's mucilaginous.
We ran into that on the fields. We know all about that already.
Yeah.
My hands.
I know,
Sticky,
because
slimy.
and I used to hate harvesting okra because mainly it was hot, and because I get poison ivy every year, and you just get so itchy. Some people are really, really sensitive. So we're going to cut off the heads, and again, this is really the reason we're trimming. We're just trimming these tops off, and it's not affecting the integrity of the vegetable. It's because I just want them to fit. And I don't want them to mushy, so I'm not cutting the tips. So that's my goal here, is I'm just prepping these.
Rachel asks, should you cut off the top part? I guess the whole thicker part?
So it looks like it's wearing a hat, right? And so what we're going to do is we're just going to cut it so that it's flush with the top of the okra. So what I'm trying to do is not open up the pod. I'm trying to just trim off the top. Does that make sense? Because if you open up the okra, again, those liquids are going to get in and it gets kind of mushy. So I'm just taking the hat off. I'm just taking the hat. I'm going to eat some more. I forgot. And I think it's fun to have lots of different sizes of okra. It makes the jar more interesting, and also the goal is to jam in as many pieces as you can possibly fit in the jar. And we're using pint jars, mason jars, and I counted about 16 can be jammed in. And so if you do that, you want to have these longer pieces, but you also want to have these short ones because they can fit at different parts of the jar. Okay, so I'm going to do more. Now the other thing is, any of this leftover okra can be used for other recipes. You could just split it and then put some olive oil on them and seasoning and roast them in the oven. Or you could be inspired to make gumbo. I don't know. There's all kinds of things you can do.
We like to slice them and put them in eggs in the morning, scrambled eggs.
Do you saute them first?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you drop the eggs in.
Yeah.
They're nice and crunchy.
Well, and that's the thing. People really don't, if you're not from the South, you don't know what this is. In fact, one of my favorite cookbooks, go get it. This is one of my favorite cookbooks, and if somebody is new to eating seasonally, eating locally, this is a really, really great resource.
From asparagus to zucchini.
And I have them for sale at the farm stand, which will be opening at the end of September. But what's great about this is that it's really simple. And it shows you a little bit about the history of the vegetable and then how to keep it fresh, and then really, really easy recipes. This was done by a collective in Wisconsin, a nonprofit that was helping people learn to eat local. The only problem with this is that it was made in Madison, Wisconsin. So they are not familiar with the pleasures of okra. So
Sounds like you're gonna have to offer a book here.
I think we might be doing
There's
that.
a demand.
We might be doing that. So while we're waiting for these jars to finish boiling, I'm going to go over a little bit about the spices that are in your plates. So we're using canning pickling salts. Now you can use kosher salt, you can use other salts, but what makes this special is that it keeps the liquid clear. It's a really fine salt. And so when you add it to this recipe, you're just going to have a more attractive jar. That's all it is. But you don't have to use this. You don't. But it helps. The other thing is this recipe. There are many, many recipes online. There's so many. But what we're doing today is a really basic recipe that is recommended by the makers of the jars. Now I've played with it a little bit because Skip has grown these lovely bird peppers. That I just think are just beautiful. And so I thought it'd be a nice combination to put the bird peppers in with, so these are bird peppers, some okra, garlic, and then there are all these assortments of mustard seed, celery seed, coriander, and dill seed. Now these are the fundamentals of canning. Every recipe is going to call for these often. And I think what's really great, in fact, if you feel comfortable, you should smell it because it's just this wonderful mix. It's a really, really mild mix, but it's a distinctive scent. So this is kind of the basics. When you're canning on your own, you get more comfortable. You could also add lemon slices. You know, if you really like things hot, you can put in these. Skip has also grown these Hungarian hot wax, and these suckers are orange.
Rachel's asking, can you add sugar like you do with pickles, or would it taste bad?
I wouldn't. That's not. No. I think okra should be, when it's pickled, it should be a savory. If you want to put in sugar, you could, but I think it would take away from it. I really do. So these spices were chosen because they're the fundamentals. The other thing that we did is we got vinegar. Now you'll notice when you buy vinegar, it has an acidity rating. So this says 5%, and you'll see it's recommended for pickling. So there are different acid levels with vinegars. So that's what you want to look for, is the 5% is really the best.
That's the one thing that didn't come with their kit. So for everyone
Yes.
at home, we will need your vinegar.
Yeah. Now again, it's kind of like the salt. If you don't have the right acidity, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. This is a really, really basic, easy thing to do. It's hard to screw up. So I think at this point we should be getting our jars out of the water. And again, what we were doing, and I just realized some of you probably don't have a jar lifter. This is a piece of equipment that I depend on. Let me see. We have a.
So they use like an oven mitt?
Yeah, I'm using an oven mitt. That would be good. Or I'm going to make believe I'm in a tiny house, and I'm taking it out with an oven mitt. Not ideal, but we did it. I'm not going to use the fancy equipment.
She's roughing it.
I'm roughing it. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm making sure that these are really, really hot. And the next step, while those are for the liquid. And that liquid is 1 to 1. So we're going to use 2 cups of vinegar. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to make extra just to be safe. So we're going to use 3 cups. I'm doing 3, but you can use 2. And then we're going to match it with the water. 3 cups of water. And again, you just need to do 2 cups of vinegar and 2 cups of water. I'm doing extra so I have it for the class. All right, we put it back on the stove and we want that to boil. All right, so now we are going to be filling our jars. I think it's best, ooh, I forgot, we have our garlic. Okay, so the spices are gonna go in each jar, but leave out the garlic, because the garlic needs to be peeled. Okay, so all right, and since I have this Hungarian hot wax, I'm going to put this in there as well. So you want to prep your garlic, and again, it's the easiest. I trim the ends, I mash it, just because it makes the paper come off faster. And you can leave it as a whole large piece like this, or you can just divide. I think one of the things about pickling is that you want even if it's for yourself, it's nice to make it pretty. So having different color going on in the jar is fun.
Do you have the recipe written down anywhere?
I do, and I can send it.
I think it was written on the bags.
Yeah, it was written on the bags, but the actual I can follow up by sending a recipe out because I didn't think, because you know what, this is so simple, I didn't even think to write it down. So,
Well, I think in that email follow-up I did to everyone, I put it on that, but only for the folks who RSVP. So if it's like, if you're watching this and you're not a resident, then they wouldn't have received it.
okay, right.
We can link it to this event too.
Yeah, we'll comment below so that if you wanted to do this after you're watching, you could require all the right ingredients.
Okay, so the jar is now at a temperature where I can touch it. It's warm. It has all the yummy stuff at the bottom. And now we're going to do the fun thing. We're going to stuff it. Now, people do this a variety of different ways. There's no one right way to do this.
Somebody missed. Can you just recap what we're doing with the water and vinegar?
So on the stove are 2 cups of vinegar and 2 cups of water, and they're boiling. But we're
1-to-1 ratio.
1 to 1, and we're waiting for them to boil.
So depending on the size of your jars, you can do 3 cups, you can do 1 cup water, 1 cup vinegar,
Yes.
3 and 3.
Yeah, it's 1 to 1. Because essentially what we're going to do with the liquid is once the okra is in here, we want to fill it to about the top of the jar. This is called headspace, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So, all right, this is the fun thing. So you can some people like to put it at an angle, and they want every piece, they start with the big pieces. Now again, this is not going to work, so I'm going to take that out. They can put them, and you can go, the tip can go right up to that band. You can go a little bit further, but not much. So you can put them all in the same way, or you can flip them. And see, now that tip is poking out. I'm going to go ahead and trim this. That means that this is probably going to make it a little more mushy. I think that they're delicious. So you can flip it, you can make them uniform, but the main thing is you start with the largest pieces first. And as you start you're going to realize that they're all kind of coming up a bit. So this is when you start putting the smaller pieces in. And what you want to do is really be aggressive in finding those gaps and spaces. And so you just push them all the way down. So you start from the largest to the smallest.
She's doing a
I was
cheer.
cheering for you.
So see, these are itty bitties, but I still think these are great because, you know, you can put them in a cocktail. And that means you just get more pickled yumminess. So you want to make this just as cram tight as you can. And again, they're going to start moving up a bit, and that's fine. We'll deal with that later. Okay, so I'm working on the next jar. And again, you want to go from largest to smallest. I don't know about that. Okay. And they can be a little curved.
Oh, is Mandela having a hard time watching the beginning of the video?
She's having a hard time seeing the full video for some reason, but everyone else seems to be seeing it okay. Sorry, Vandala.
Okay, so again, I'm putting in a little bit of red, a little bit of green, mostly green. And I'm going to add these itty bitties. Alright, so really what we're coming up on now is really the part of canning where people get nervous. And there's really no reason to get nervous with this part. It's really, really quite simple. Alright, so we have our jars stuffed and ready. Now what we need is some boiling vinegar and water. It's not boiling yet. So what I want to do is show you some equipment, because again, you're all going to become master canners. You'll be doing this all the time. Or maybe you can convince one person to get the equipment and you can all go over to their house at some point and do this together. But a traditional way of preserving these jars is to get something called a water bath. And if you want to look in here, the water bath comes with this ring. So when you're pickling the items, it sits on that ring. Now, the way this works, this water bath canner, is that you have to fill it with water, and the water stays at a boil, and it's a little easier to control than moving a pot from the sink to the stove and then back. Once all the jars are in, then you put this on top, and this helps conduct the heat. And so then you can do, I think you can do 6 to 8 jars at one time. So that is one option if you're going to invest in doing canning on a regular basis.
What does something like that cost?
You know, I bought this so long ago, I can't remember.
I think like $50, $100.
I honestly can't remember. That stuff never sticks in my head, so I don't know.
Maybe we could buy one for the farmhouse for the farm
Ooh.
residents to have.
That's a great idea.
Now we're talking.
Okay, so if we're going to buy something, I wouldn't get this one. Let me show you.
Different brand.
This thing. Oh
Sorry,
my-
Ball Company.
Sorry, goodbye, Ball. I think this might still be Ball. I love this. This is amazing. This is it's idiot proof. And what's great about this is that it takes all of this is called, they call it an automatic home canning system. What I love about this is that, again, you can go ahead and take a look in here. It's the same thing, except you're using just about 2 or 3 inches of water. So it's using steam to help preserve the can. So this is I think it's a pressure cooker. But it's so easy to use, it's fantastic. So it uses a lot less water than the other one. And that kind of takes a while to heat up. And then you can program it to sterilize the jars, and then according to your recipe, you just press the buttons. And the canning should be usually done within half an hour. So you can just do. So this is a great thing to have.
Rachel's on board for the community pressure cooker idea.
Okay. Maybe we can do an Instapot. You know, we can do
Let us know in the comments if your vinegar is ready.
Because I'm ready to. What's another thing? Oh, you know what? While we're waiting, I did a little bit of research. I mean, I always knew that okra was healthy, but I knew that it helped with cholesterol. But what I didn't realize was how. And essentially, the mucilaginous substance of the okra binds in your digestion and you excrete cholesterol rather than absorb it.
Wow.
So it's a really fascinating system that is helping reduce cholesterol. In Turkey, they roast okra seeds as a diabetes medicine. So that's another interesting thing. And then there's a long-standing African American or African tradition to soak okra in water overnight and then drink that water, and that curbs appetite. So if you're dieting, you might consider soaking your okra and then just drinking the water in the morning.
Wow. Food as medicine.
Exactly, food is medicine. And that's why my husband and I started the farm, because we used to work in public health. Another thing to think about while we're waiting for this to boil is that, people spend a lot of money on Gatorade. And what they're not realizing is if you need electrolytes or quenching in the summer, you should be drinking pickle juice, because everybody has a leftover jar of pickle juice. Well, and that comes from essentially a mix of vinegar and salt. So you could drink the contents of this once you're done eating the okra. Oh, and I should explain, this okra, once you're done, it can be stored for up to a year on a shelf, a cool, dark space for a year. I think that it's best to put the ones that you're going to eat soon in a refrigerator and just let it sit for, as long as you can make it sit, but it'll taste better and better. It'll taste great in about 3 weeks. Having said that, I can usually last about a day before I eat them. So you might want to experiment. Put one on your shelf and then think about taking it out for the holidays, Super Bowl game in January, or put one in your fridge and have it with dinner in the next week or so.
We have a question from Stephanie. What's the best way to store the okra that you don't jar?
The best way to store it is to put it in a plastic bag, wrap it tight, and then put it in the bottom drawer of your refrigerator. Now the thing about okra is it begins to get age spots pretty quickly. So you don't want it to sit around, and you don't want okra to be moist. So don't wash it and then put it away. It's kind of like with basil. So what happens with basil is that people will make the mistake of washing it, and then the basil turns black, and it ruins it. So you don't want to wash the okra and put it away. You want to just put it in airtight, put it in the fridge, and then use it the next few days. Another thing you could do, though, is you could blanch it. If you want to preserve it, you could put it in the freezer. So that's another thing to think about, is just chopping it up. I think you have to blanch it first and then put it in a bag. So you might need to do a little research on that.
We have a few people that are still waiting on the boiling.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to get started because I don't want everybody to sit and wait.
Well, they can watch you demo, and then by then it should be boiling for them.
Exactly.
They commented a little bit ago, so maybe they're good to go.
Okay, so again, the head space, just think of the head space for canning varies with each thing that you can. But for this instance, what we're trying to do is fill the jar essentially up to the rim, the first rim. And if you go over, don't worry, because we can spoon it out. In fact, I'm going to purposefully go over on this one. Okay, that's way too much. Okay, so this is a really important thing to see. So you see how these bubbles are coming up? Things are beginning to boil and boil. It's like a witch's brew.
It looks so pretty. This will be a nice Instagram shot.
Smells good.
What's happening is that the air is beginning to escape, or it's trying to escape. And so you're gonna see lots of bubbles coming up. And that's good. We want that. We want to get as much air out as possible. And the only reason we're trying to get all the air out is we want to have a good seal. It isn't about botulism. It isn't about disease. It's just we want to have a good seal on your jar. So take a look at those bubbles and let the bubbles come up naturally. I said to several of you that a chopstick is really the best way to work your jar, because what we're doing, see if you can see here, I am purposely pushing this down because I'm trying to generate more air bubbles. I want to get as many air bubbles out as I can. So if you have a chopstick, that's ideal. You know, the manufacturers, the mason jars, the ball jars, they really don't think it's a good idea to put metal in here, only because it compromises the jar itself. So if you don't have anything like a chopstick handy, you could use a plastic utensil. But essentially, you're going to just move this around, trying to get the bubbles out. So, and some of these okra are trying to escape. So we're going to push them back in. And ideally, they will all part of it, all parts of it, will be under the liquid. So when you push it all the way down, and again, I'm seeing a few bubbles. And you know, when we seal it, it's still gonna have a few bubbles. It's not gonna all go away, but it's mostly going away. So when I look at the level of this liquid, it's a little bit high. So I'm gonna take some of it out. And we can just tilt it a little bit. Really what we're looking at is we want it at least a 1/4 inch. Let me just pour it out. There you go. There we go. Want it about a 1/4 inch from the top. Okay, now here's the most important step. Once you've got the bubbles out, what you want to do is you want to dry the rim of the jar. So I'm doing the outside of the jar, and then I'm going to do the top rim. And the only reason this is important is this is what makes the seal. So these lids should not be reused. You want to get new ones every time you do this. Oh, and it used to be that people would boil these. They thought they'd sterilize them. You don't. They come ready to use. So we're going to put that on, and then we're going to put the seal on. And when you're sealing, don't muscle it. You want to lightly seal it, because once the jar is boiled, really, you don't even need these rings. And in fact, once this seal comes off, often you finish the whole jar. So you don't even need this to store it. So this is really just to keep the top on while we're preserving it. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over here. We're going to push it down, and I intentionally poured in too much. So I'm just going to let it go there, pouring it off. And then as you push them down, the level of the liquid is going to rise. And again, so now I have some pokey bits here. And I think they're a little too tall. So you can try pushing them down, or you can just cut them off. Okay. All right, so this is really, really snug. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to put in our probe, which I guess if you only have a plastic utensil, we could do it that way. Notice that the bubbles are coming up as we do that. The bubbles. So, like I said, some bubbles will continue to come up, but for the most part, that's taken care of. Okay, so again, you most important step in this whole thing is just making sure that the top of the jar is dry. You don't want any liquid. So that is the most important thing. Okay, so these are ready for boiling. And so for this recipe, all you have to do is put it in underwater for 10 minutes. Each jar needs to be underwater, boiling for 10 minutes. So I have this pot. Let's see if it started boiling. Oh, it's not boiling yet. So it has to be boiling. So I am going to turn this up, and I'm going to put them in here. Put the lid on, and I'm going to need to add a little more water to cover it.
They need to be covered. Maybe some of the neighbors that don't have the proper size pot can link up with one another to drop their jars.
So you want to, let me just cover it a bit. So again, with a traditional enamelware pot like this, it takes a lot of water to get this thing sealed properly. You definitely need a kettle in here. Okay, we'll add that to the list and let the shop. Let me get on Amazon. Then we can have fresh tea. That'd be nice. Yes. Okay, but a little bit more water. So the jars have to be underwater. Okay, so I'm not going to time this until it starts boiling. And so ideally you have them standing up, but as long as there's room, you can push them down like I'm doing here.
So they can be on their side.
They can, but it's not ideal because it's going to move around. It's not ideal.
They don't float.
No, they should not float. Well, they might float in the boiling process a little bit, but the main thing is it's got to be underwater. So this is going to take a while for this pot to get hot enough. But what's going to happen, and I think that we can wrap up, because essentially for 10 minutes, you time it from the time it starts boiling. Keep it at a boiling boil for 10 minutes. Then you'll take it out, and I think an important thing to keep in mind is when you take out the jar, it needs to go on a protected surface. So that can be a towel, it can be a cutting board, but you don't want to take it out of the boiling water and put it on your counter, because that is not fun. So then once it's on the counter or cutting board, you want to leave it in place for 24 hours. You don't want to move it around. So just find a place now where you're going to let it sit. And what's going to happen is as the jar cools, you're going to hear a popping sound. It's going to go, whoop, and that's perfect because that means the seal has worked. So the best thing is just to check it in the morning. So this time tomorrow, just check it. And again, you'll be able to take, once the jar is completed, you could take that part off and just store it without this. And you could reuse this somewhere else. But, so you'll hear that ping, that's a good noise. You let it sit for 24 hours. And then if you have willpower, you can just wait a few more days, put it in the fridge, and then enjoy it for a snack. Yay!
So you can store it in the fridge, or you can store it in a cool, dark place.
Yes, it can be on the shelf for up to a year. Yeah. I think we should have a competition to see who can last the longest before they open it.
You gifted the jar to me to taste test, and I only lasted like 2 days. And then I had it as a snack, and I ate all of it in 10 minutes.
In one sitting.
Yeah, it was so good.
The thing is, it's really a great thing to eat right now because it's so hot. If you're outside like you are, you get dehydrated, and this is a really
Do we have any last minute questions from anyone in the audience? Can you do a quick recap overview of the steps real quick for us?
Sure. Okay, so you harvest okra.
Harvest okra.
You wash it very lightly. You get a container that covers the mason jar in water, and you start boiling that on the stove. So it's good. That's really one of the first steps, is to make sure you have boiling water to sterilize your jar. Then, after you wash the okra, I think it's really good to sort it and then cut off their hats. Again, we're not cutting, and I'll show you the wrong way. Don't cut into the okra. Don't do this. You're just going to cut off the hat because we want there to be enough room in the jar. You're just trying to make room in the jar. So you sort your okra, and then you choose your spices. And again, I think it's really great to use colorful spices. I only used 1 clove of garlic, but there's nothing wrong with using more. I'm a big fan of garlic. And then the spices, traditional spices are coriander, mustard, celery, and dill. Salt. Again, the pickling salt is best if you want a really clear complexion on your jar, but you can use other kinds of salt. And then again, when you're looking for vinegar, you want to look for a low acidity, the one that says for pickling. Again, it doesn't have to be that, but it just, the end result is what you would anticipate. Then you take your hot jar, you pack the jar as tightly as you can, you put your spices in, you pour the liquid up to, this area is called a head space. And every vegetable has a different head space. But typically, a rule of thumb is just cover the vegetable while still leaving room, like a 1/4 inch, for the seal. So once it's packed, you pour in the boiling liquid. The most important step, again, is to try and get as much air out of the jar. And then before you seal it, as again, the seal is the most important thing, is that you clean the top very well. Then you boil it for 10 minutes and let it, take it out, let it pop, go ping, let it sit for a day, and then you can either store it in a shelf for a year, or if you feel like you're going to eat it in the next week or so, just put it in the fridge and it'll marinate and be amazing.
Cool. Jenna was asking the name of the book again.
Yeah.
From
So
asparagus to zucchini.
That is just a fantastic book. It will really, really help you store vegetables, make easy dishes. In fact, maybe that's the book we'll be using for our cooking classes. So neighbors, if you don't have any more questions, maybe the next time I'll see you is at the farm stand, or if you want to volunteer, we take volunteers on the farm, no experience necessary. We're also going to start our CSA soon, where people can sign up to get a share of vegetables or flowers beginning at the end of September. And hopefully we can do a cooking class and show you how to use what's growing right outside your door.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you for joining me, and feel free to email if you have questions.
Thanks.
Enjoy!